start from the beginning. So yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, like I said, my name's Arron Watson. I work for the Environment Agency as a analysis and reporting officer. I've got a slide that covers some of my background, and I'm giving this talk to promote Riverfly, really. I don't work at the Riverfly Partnership, but I do mention who does, and I'm sort of involved with it through the Environment Agency, but I absolutely love it. So Alex said, would I give this talk after I was at a training event, becoming a trainer? And I thought, yeah, it'd be a great idea to promote it. So let me, so the history behind the Riverfly Partnership goes back quite a long time. Back to the 1970s, where they started some of the early recording schemes, people like Ian Wallace, who wrote the Case Caddisfly book, and other people started that sort of work. And then by the 1980s, Cyril Bennett, who helped sort of do some of the early work, including some of the beautiful images that came with some of the earlier sort of identification sheets. And then by sort of the mid 1980s onwards, Steve Brooks, who's the chairman of Riverfly, was sort of heavily involved, and it sort of stayed at the Natural History Museum all the way up to when Steve retired, and even now, actually, when we tend to have Riverfly Partnership conferences, they are sort of usually made at the Natural History Museum, or events tend to be there. So what is the Riverfly Partnership? I'm going to cover quite a lot of different aspects of it throughout the talk, so it might be sort of I'm mentioning one thing and you're asking, no, I don't know what he means. So it's a bit jumbled in a way, but the Riverfly Partnership is an organisation which is hosted by the Freshwater Biological Association, which is, if you've not heard of it before, it's based at Windermere. It used to produce scientific publications. Now it's more involved in education, conservation. They conserve pearl mussels, and they also publish books. And because the Riverfly Partnership is sort of been funded from a grant in the beginning, and then it's actually been funded by the EA for quite a long time, it needs to be hosted by someone else. So at the minute, it's with the Freshwater Biological Association. So you'll see that when you go on the website, they sort of run together. There's two people who officially work at Riverfly. So Alex and Trini, they're both Riverfly coordinators. And between them, they sort of, put people in touch with the right groups, help coordinate sites, answer questions, all sorts of different things. And then on top of that, there's an advisory board, which I sit on, along with many other people from different organisations that I mentioned in the partners page. And that sort of group is there to help sort of discuss, how riverflies might build and grow. And it's a really exciting time at the minute, because there's a lot of new stuff that's just been sort of developed and being launched, which I'll cover later on. So the EA staff involved in it, so this is my sort of part, is that the way that Riverfly works is that when you set up a new site, the operational instruction or the guidance suggests that you get in touch with your local EA ecology contact, and they can sort of advise on maybe where you might want to put a site, or they can also recommend a score for that site. So a score is basically this special number that you're going to use, and then when you go and do your invertebrate sampling and you total your scores, you're looking to see if the score that you've got from your river matches this trigger score that we're going to discuss a bit more. And the ecology contacts are there to sort of to help advise and sort of report back on that. And there's about 28 of those across the country. So it's been, like I said, it's been running for quite a long time. The project itself has been running for well over a decade. And, you've seen the timeline earlier, if not officially longer. But as far as I'm aware, we've been collecting data on the database for well over a decade now, which is great. So the database on the website is currently down while they're just fixing the new website, which looks great. And when that's back up, you'll be able to, you can troll through all of the data if you want to and have a look at some of the rivers that you might fish on. So the core aims of Riverfly, taken from the website, is all these different points here, which cover the sort of the drivers behind the work that Riverfly does. Improving conservation status and raising public and strategic awareness along with many other things. But it's really good that these are clear objectives of what Riverfly wants to do, and sort of that helps us. Helps us. I say it helps Riverflies, and obviously our advisory board sort of understand, what are the goals of Riverflies as a project. So who am I? A little bit late in there about who I am instead of at the beginning, but I felt it was fitting to introduce Riverflies, then say who I am. So I'm an analysis and reporting officer. My main role is to sort of investigate, rivers, and I do quite a lot of different things. I analyse aquatic invertebrates in a lab. I sort of do a bit of hydroacoustics, involved in invasive species, all sorts of different things. But my voluntary role is to help coordinate those sort of 28 ecology contracts across the 40 plus areas of the Environment Agency. So the people who volunteer to do it fit it into their spare time, and we sort of liaise with different groups, and the groups are set out in what's called a hub. So each of the Riverflies groups around the country, there's lots and lots and lots of them. There's over 3,500 volunteers plus. They sit into a hub, and then that hub coordinator coordinates with the ecology contacts at the Environment Agency, and then the volunteers coordinate with the hub coordinator. So it's all really structured, and if you go on the Riverflies website, it does actually set out exactly what those roles are and what they do. And that structure works really well, because then the hub coordinator can put the information onto the website, so they're all, instead of everybody doing it. And maybe there might be some anglers where they just quite happily collect the data but don't want to do anything to do with the computer. So that's what the hub is set up to do. My background's in entomology. I'm very passionate about entomology. I've got into fishing. I took up fly fishing 2 years ago now, and did a bit of coarse fishing growing up. Do sea fishing as well. So I've sort of gone the other way. I've started in entomology and then got into fishing, whereas a lot of anglers I speak to, especially fly fishermen or fly fish people that get into, they're into fishing and then they learn the insects, but it's quite easy for me to do it the other way around. So I've trained to become a Riverflies trainer as well, actually, to do in my spare time, which, because I just love Riverflies that much, I just wanted to help train people. So I'm one of 3 trainers in the Northwest, but there's trainers all across the country, and there's quite a few people that travel around doing that. And I've already mentioned that I try and fly fish when I get spare 5 minutes, if I'm not giving talks to people or doing other things. So why Riverflies? So when we talk about Riverflies, stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies, they're the main ones. But we do include some of the other invertebrates that fish eat. Well, I say fish, that mainly sort of trout or grayling eat, because this is what it was all focused around, really. The origin of the project was on chalk streams, and it was for fly fishing on chalk streams. So it was focusing on sort of some of the aquatic insects that those fish eat. But actually, when you start to look at some of the fish that are stocked in coarse fisheries and elsewhere, they have very sort of similar diets in a way of what they eat, from what I've read anyway through the research. But really, they all sort of go together, I think, really. So, insects like happy places to live, fish like eating insects, and anglers like fishing. So together, they create a happy environment, which means more fish for food, and obviously means more fish for fishing, which we all want. So that was the idea, was to push Riverflies to anglers, really, to fly fishermen, and sort of get them doing it, because then they're out fishing, they want to know what the fish are eating. This is what I tell people when I speak to anglers. I always say, if you know what the fish are eating, then you know what to set your flies, and then if you know what to set your flies, hopefully you'll get a better catch. So that's one of the benefits. And then if you're getting that information from what invertebrates are out there already, then you can just write that down and submit it for a different reason. So it's given an indication of pollution, and that's what Riverflies does. It's a real good indicator of organic pollution. So it all started with sort of people studying insects, really, and we know that certain fish eat certain insects, and they might eat certain insects at times of the year, and we know that certain insects become flying insects at certain times of the year, or they're nymphs at certain times of the year. So you can start to really kind of build up a good understanding of what you'd be looking for, what you're sort of interested in recording. And on top of that, you sort of start to think about, are any of these insects sort of sensitive to certain things? You know, are they sensitive to temperature or you know, phosphate or whatever it is? And what happened is people developed techniques for different reasons. So the Biological Monitoring Working Party, here you can see a definition from Wikipedia, and this was set up as the BMWP scoring system. And what they did is they took, you know, lots of different aquatic insects that people had heavily studied, and they sort of worked out that they were some certain groups or certain families, we call them, are real good indicators of certain different changes. And from that, the BMWP scoring system was developed. And, you know, the Environment Agency, SEPA, National Resource Wales all started using, you know, indicators like this as indicator systems like this to sort of help understand the pressures that are going on in rivers. From that, there's a number of other indices that were developed on top of that. So an indices is a list of sort of numbers and that are linked to different creatures, and then those numbers totaled up give us an indication of some sort of range. And so there was a flow method developed by some colleagues in the Environment Agency and some other people, and they developed so you can look at invertebrates and see how they are good indicators of flow. You can look at invertebrates who are good indicators of sediment. You know, there's all these different things that they respond to. And so it was, I think it was not quite easy, but it was a real good way to say, oh, okay, well, we could probably change this high level sort of system into something that anybody could do. You just go on a day's training course, learn how to identify some real easy sort of groups of invertebrates, and go out with your kick sampling net and do a sample. And that's how sort of Riverflies was sort of developed. It was developed off the back of some of these other indices, because we already knew that certain groups are real good indicators. So stoneflies, you know, I always see them as sort of one of the highest sort of indicators, you know, those real fast flowing, high dissolved oxygen, you know, clean rivers. Some stoneflies, certain stoneflies, you'll only get, you know, in the north of Yorkshire or in Scotland, where they need lots and lots of fast flowing dissolved oxygen. And then there's, you know, there's certain types of caddisfly that just prefer really clean, you know, really clean sort of water. So if you're not getting them and they're meant to be there, you know that there's something maybe wrong with the water. And this goes along with some of the certain mayflies. So the blue-winged olive is a common one that a lot of people talk about. So the blue-winged olive is an indicator of good quality. And that, you know, they get really excited in Manchester area on the Airwell, if you speak to some of the chaps in Mersey Trust, because they're finally seeing the return of the blue-winged olive after the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, some of these groups are real good indicators of change. So and then you can start to look at numbers as well. So you can start to look at, you know, lots and lots and lots of different insects is very good. You know, only a few groups is bad. So the idea is that if you're getting lots of different things in lots of amounts, you know, that's really good. But if you're only getting one or two certain things, what's going on? What's wrong? You know, why are they dying off? And that's what sort of these sort of indicators tell us. They tell us that certain things might die off in certain conditions. So, yeah, I've mentioned about dissolved oxygen. But really, Riverflies is your sort of your broader organic pollution. So Riverflies is there to sort of pick up organic pollution. So it's there to pick up that organic pollution has entered the river, and it's sort of probably eating up all the dissolved oxygen and changing the water chemistry. And then, you know, all the inverts start dying off. And that's an early indicator before the fish die. And there's been quite a lot of good examples of how that sort of picked up. It's picked up the inverts dying before the fish has died, and they've managed to get out and sort of investigate that beforehand. So I've already touched upon the Riverfly partnership, but the actual scheme itself is called the Anglers Riverfly Monitoring Initiative, so ARMI, and that's how it's referred to a lot of people. It's sort of Army, or a lot of people say doing Riverfly or Fly Life, but the acronym is Army. So if anyone says Army, we're not talking about the military. We're talking about the actual scheme that's named Army. So to get involved, it's volunteers get trained up. You've got to identify 7 insect groups. Sorry, I think I might have miscounted there. There's 8, sorry. And you get a rough indicator of population size by counting up the different groups. So you're saying what you can see in a tray, and you're counting them all up, and then you're getting a rough idea of the population. So I've mentioned about trigger breaches already, so I'll go into a little bit more detail about trigger breaches. So once you've got a score for your site, so it's been set up and you've got this sort of trigger score, it tells you that if you go and do your sampling and you get a score lower than that trigger score, then there's a problem. So, and then that's referred to as a trigger breach, and that trigger breach, you can report that. Now, this is separate from if you go down to the river and you see, black gloop over the river, going across the river before you've even done your Riverfly sample. That's a pollution incident, and that can be reported to the EA hotline immediately anyway. The idea with Riverflies is it's picking up something really early. So it's picking up that organic pollution that's already sort of seeping in and killing off the inverts, because they're the most sensitive things, before it kills the fish. So, if you do see something that's not right, then you're entitled as a member of the public to ring up and report that as a pollution incident. If you smell something not right, or you see something that's not right, you can ring it in straight away before you even got round. And also, obviously, the risk assessment that you do as part of this, you probably wouldn't advise anybody to get in the river if there was sort of black gloop or a horrible smell of something, because you don't want to put yourself at risk. So case studies, there's a number of case studies. I've just pulled out a couple. You can Google the Citizen Crane project, and this was a really widespread project. I mean, you can see that the amount of volunteers, 50 volunteers over 11 sampling sites, and then obviously deployed 2,000 volunteers annually over 80 catchments. This is really good, and you can see there where they say about a score below a pre-agreed trigger level indicates that the river may be polluted, and is reported to the EA National Environment Incident Line. So that's slightly changed in a way. We sort of recommend that you report your trigger breaches to your ecology contact, and unless it's out of hours, it can be it should be reported to the hotline. But we're still sort of working out with Riverfly the best way to sort of respond to volunteers in the quickest way, really, and that seems to be a bit quicker. So focusing on another case study, I'm pretty sure the left picture is the downstream and the right is the upstream site, and you can see that by Riverfly Monitoring, they were able to pick up a problem at the downstream site, and there was no problem at the upstream site, so they could pinpoint exactly where the problem was coming from. And the Riverfly volunteers called it in, and the Riverfly ecology contact for this area responded, and they managed to pick up a discharge, which they managed to find out where it was coming from and sort of stop it. So that was a real good example of how Riverfly should work in practice, really. But there's been lots and lots of other benefits as well. So, I mean, these are all from the Riverfly's website. If you like your scientific publications, or there's been a few articles in magazines and all sorts of different things, you can have a look here, and you can see that there's been lots of different stuff published by different people. I think the most recent article was at there was one with Mersey Rivers Trust, which was a really good article that they published. And there's also been a lot of master's projects, so master's students that go on after undergraduate level. There's been a lot of projects by different master's students looking at different things, and you can have a read here at some of those different projects. Absolutely fascinating, and it's really good that people want to engage like this and do different projects on things. So it's always good to hear that, you know, people are engaging beyond sort of what the scheme was set up for. So the recognised benefits, there's definitely lots and lots of different benefits. You know, even we're starting to focus now on the benefits of mental health, but it can be as simple as just engaging with the local community. So, you know, you fish on a certain stretch of river and you want to sort of get more people involved in what might, you know, what the problems might be. Or it might be that you want to sort of just want to get more of the community involved in preserving the local fish population, or, you know, just to get people involved with the importance of the river. But either way, it's a way to engage people. And because it's not just anglers that participate in this project now, it's sort of everybody from community groups through to schools to all sorts of stuff. It really kind of opens it up to sort of whatever the Riverfly group sort of ambition is really. I've already mentioned its main purpose that it was designed for, and obviously from the beginning, was it's an early warning sign for organic pollution. So, you know, that's what it was designed for. But really, you know, it started off with anglers doing it to sort of to help protect their river, and I mean, from what I was told is when they originally designed it, it was to really kind of like point out to, you know, to the EA where there might be sort of where we're not checking really, and maybe not doing our job. But since then, having spoken to people in Riverfly who've been involved with it, so it's changed so much. Now it's grown, and now it's sort of everything from getting people out through to you know, having extra eyes and ears on the river, through to, you know, understanding the insect populations better, to everything. So it's just a real broad sort of program that can be applied to all sorts of different things. And I've mentioned about reported incidents. So yeah, the sort of, once the trigger breach is reported, I mean, you know, I will sort of say that we would love to respond to every single trigger breach if we could, but because we do it voluntarily in the EA, you know, we do struggle to be able to go to every single trigger breach. So it sort of we're trying to work out a way, and it might be that, you know, what I mentioned about a project that Riverflies is being sort of part of, and the Environment Agency is as well, the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative. It might be in the future that we find you know, a better way to sort of to be able to respond to more trigger breaches. But regardless, a lot of the people that are involved with it when it comes to reporting those trigger breaches are very passionate about it, and have been doing it for, you know, and some people I've spoken to have been doing it for the last nearly a decade, you know, voluntarily as well. And then on top of it, it's worth mentioning about the volunteers as well. So, you know, like I said, there's over 3,500 volunteers. Some of them have been doing it for decades. And, you know, it's those people that make a difference, really. And those people that are sort of watching these rivers change, and watching, you know, the rivers change very, very quickly in some cases because of climate change and other reasons. So going back to new schemes, and so I've mentioned about Army, and obviously I said it's an exciting time in Riverflies, which it is. We've got two new schemes that, Riverflies have got two new schemes that are being launched. So I can't take any of the credit for this really. These schemes have been developed to sort of help with a growing need for different scores. So Urban Riverfly was designed by someone in the Environment Agency, and developed it to sort of be able to look at the urban rivers really, and because the Army was designed for chalk streams originally, it doesn't pick up urban rivers as well, because, you know, you might not be getting all of this different types of caddisfly and some of the stoneflies that you might expect to get on a chalk stream. So this scheme was developed to add in a few extra different creatures, let's say. So snails, water beetles, worms and leeches were added in, and they give extra scores, and they also give different indicators as well. And just because it's called Urban Riverfly doesn't mean it's just for urban rivers. It's for rivers that might have ongoing problems with organic pollution. So maybe more about that from Riverflies, but hopefully there'll be a follow-up talk and to sort of go into more detail about things. And then the extended Riverfly is a 33 invertebrate groups that are there to sort of indicate different changes. And the idea around this was it's a big pull-out chart, and it does have different sort of indicating scores, but to get the chart itself without the scores on, you can buy. So you can buy that chart from the FBA's website, which I'll put a link to, for £10, and you can take that out and you can just use it for pure interest. But then if you are trained in Riverfly, there's what you will get the score sheet that goes with it, because obviously, you know, you'll be trained to be able to do the scoring system. And there's lots of different things that, you know, you've got everything on there from signal crayfish through to, you know, invasive shrimp to all sorts of different stuff, you know, mussels and bivalves and all sorts of different stuff. So that's quite exciting. So that trainers are getting trained up to train people, so train 3 times in July, and then hopefully the different Riverfly groups will be getting trained up in the coming year. So I've mentioned about some of the partners. So if you go on the Riverfly's website, there's so much information on there, which is great. There's even actually some principal posters on there, actually, of one of the things I showed, which was the fly life cycle. But there's also a big list of all of the different partners that are featured within Riverfly, and there's been so many different organizations, you know, many of them that sit on the advisory board, and many of them just, you know, passionate about Riverfly or being involved with it, used it for projects, all sorts of different things. So these are just in alphabetical order. You can see A, F, and R, but the list is massive. So while the Riverfly's website data section is currently not live because they've just had a brand new website built and they're still just fine-tuning it. In the meantime, I'm going to share a different website in the chat, which is you can kind of explore some of the Riverfly data along with the EA invertebrate data, phosphate and nitrate data, and then another project called Freshwater Watch, which collects phosphate and nitrate around the world. But this map is just focused on the UK. And so I'll share this, and what you can do is you can sort of zoom in and zoom out. There is a video at the beginning of the website as you open it, and watch the video because it'll show you how to use it, because you know, it is a little bit technical, but at the same time it's not too, you know, it's meant to be for the public to use, so it's not too overly complex. So this is the sort of screen that you'll expect to see, and these different colored dots, and then there's a key in the bottom left hand corner which explains what they are. So you've got green triangles are Riverfly sites. I can't remember what the other coloured shapes are, but it does tell you in the bottom left hand corner. And then when you've clicked on some of these points, you can you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, and you can get a rough idea of what's going on. So you can see here the top graph. It says phosphate, so you're getting the EA and the Freshwater Watch phosphate levels for that site from 2010 to 2022. And then the bottom screen has got the invertebrate scores. So you've got the blocks of Riverflies, and the dots are EA scores. And these are, it's giving you an overall sort of score, what's being scored here. So it's getting, you know, scores of around about 8 to 15 or something like that, maybe a bit more. And you can kind of then, you know, dig into this a bit more. So the Riverfly's website itself is a lot more easy to use, and a lot more in sort of easy to visualize. I think this is a little bit more your next step afterwards when you start to want to put water chemistry data with invertebrate data. So going back to the importance of Riverflies and, you know, monitoring in general, I wanted to highlight some of the things what Riverflies does without even meaning to do it. So obviously we've talked about fish, and, you know, it's protecting fish from that early warning system, and, you know, it's just sort of there to help sort of you know, protect the future of well, you know, a lot of fish populations, mainly, like I said, trout and grayling, but it is focused on rivers, so it does have an ability to sort of be broadened. It was just designed to sort of be focusing on river flies that are obviously with the sort of fly fishing sort of community in the beginning. It definitely understands climate change. So as much as we're starting to see some of the problems slowly coming in now with the random storm events and eroding channels and all sorts of different things that are being caused from climate change. Being out on the river and doing Riverfly monitoring helps you monitor that river and sort of and flag up some of these changes that we're going to see probably coming in a lot quicker now. Whereas a lot of people thought, I might not live to see the problems from climate change, but we're already starting to see some serious problems coming in on rivers. So, it could be that by doing Riverfly monitoring, you can start to sort of see those early problems. Things like even temperature. There was a real interesting talk by Craig McAdam, who's the Conservation Director of Bug Life Scotland, and they've published a scientific paper on some of the river flies that are anticipated to maybe struggle with range because of the warming temperatures and at risk. So that was really interesting. So, you might see less invertebrates and less things for fish to eat because of increasing temperatures. Pollution, that I can't sort of sit here and sort of say that, it's a big problem. And, as much as we're sort of trying to sort of keep a handle on it through, Riverfly monitoring, it's just sort of, it's so widespread, it would appear, in many parts of the country that, it's very difficult to sort of to keep monitoring. But at the same time, it's important that, if everybody's sort of collectively getting involved in citizen science games, then maybe we can sort of try and start to sort of flag up more things. Invasive species. So I've put here a picture of one of the demon and the killer shrimp. I can't remember actually which one it is now. So you can see here that it's an identification guide from one of the invasive species websites that I've put in the next slide. And I think that's something that we've sort of moved into, where the river flies were set out to monitor just river flies for fish, but actually now it's sort of flagging up, recording invasive species and the widespread of them, and how are they affecting catchments. I've spoke to a few anglers this year actually at a conference that was saying that all they're getting is the demon or the killer shrimp in their river and nothing else. They've eaten they've killed all, sort of wiped out all of the invertebrates. Reporting problems I've mentioned. So, like I've said, river flies is there to pick up early warning signs. But if you're out at the river anyway, and you're out doing your riverfly monitoring / fishing, why not just, if you see something or you smell it, just report it anyway. And obviously, hopefully it'll sort of get picked up and there'll be a response to it. And like I've mentioned, it's promoting good mental health, so or physical health. Getting out and doing your kick sample and finding that drive to have to do that every sort of couple of months or every quarter, and getting out and keeping an eye on the river is definitely good for physical and mental health. So I wanted to mention about invasive species just because it's really important, and it's some really good resources out there. So I'll share a link to this in the chat. But yeah, you can definitely sort of learn how to identify these, but you can also use your extended riverfly chart as well and go on the training course for this. But otherwise, there's a lot of printable fact sheets to put up. So, printing these off and laminating them and putting them up round your fishery or sort of, even of signal crayfish or whatever, just to sort of tell people to keep an eye if they do see something, to report it if you've not got it. So you've got everything from the swamp crayfish and some of the other different crayfish now that are turning up in coarse fisheries. And it's, it's really important that if you can educate your fishermen about some of the reasons why it's sort of important to flag some of these things up, it's definitely worth doing. So I thought I'd add that in as an added bonus. So I've talked a lot about fly fishing, but it doesn't really it doesn't mean that, that any other anglers can't get involved. I've said to you about the benefits, and they're beyond just learning about, the different flying insects that tend to be used by fly fishermen on, as bait. But it's sort of, as flies, but, it's beyond that really. It's about sort of that understanding and engagement with the river, and sort of being able to understand what the fish are eating, and what's going on, and is there any problems with that, so it's beyond, and because it's focused on rivers, if you're fishing on a river anyway, you could be involved with this while also, coarse fishing. It's not just for fly fishermen. And a lot of the people who are involved with it these days tend to be, anybody from community groups through to, people who are just interested in the rivers, through to, I know a few people that don't fish that have been doing river flies for a couple of decades. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on it, but I'm thinking Steve Brooks, who's the chairman, I don't think he fishes. So, getting trained up, the easiest way to get trained up is to find out where your local group is. So while the website's down, the email's the easiest way. But once the website is fully finished, you can usually zoom in to find out what groups are near you and where people have been monitoring. And that way you can then ask to be put in touch with your local group. But otherwise, for now, try not bombard Alex and Trini with too many emails, because I'm sure they might not thank me. But there's always room for more Riverfly volunteers. And once you've done that training and you've got your certificate, then you get put onto a site, or you sort of develop a site, and then you get out and start monitoring. So what happens next? So you've been trained up and you found your site and you joined your group. There's a great example here from Pembrokeshire Rivers Trust of how to fill in the sheet. And then you sort of, start recording, you start to sort of record, either in the spring and then the autumn, or you sort of might go out a bit more frequently. But you've got to remember, every time you go out, you might be causing some sort of disturbance on the river, which could then lead to sort of, it could lead to damage in the river. So you have to really plan, how frequently you're going to go out. But, understanding spring and autumn is the sort of standard really for populations, and maybe once in the summer. So 2023 Riverfly's got lots of stuff going on. I've mentioned about the extended scheme and the urban scheme. So they're both sort of slowly, urban scheme is on a slow rollout, and then the extended scheme, trainers are getting trained, and then there'll be training for volunteers next year. There even is some groups being trained up this year that are a bit more sort of involved with the people who developed it. And then the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative I've mentioned, definitely go off and YouTube search Working Towards a Catchment Monitoring Cooperative by Michelle Walker and watch that. And you can sort of work out where citizen science might be sort of moving. And here's a quick glimpse on the right-hand side of, what it sort of aims to achieve. And, that sort of standardized methods and things like that. And Riverfly is part of that, which is great. So it's got a new website. It's already got a really good database. These are all sort of being migrated onto this new website, which I've shown a lot of clips of. And then hopefully in 2023, they'll be having a conference as well. So additional training, it would definitely make sense to mention about some of the other places that you can sort of get involved and get trained in river flies. So the Freshwater Biological Association, the FBA, they offer courses for entomology for anglers, taught by some of the real experts out there. These people who've been doing it for decades, written books and all sorts of different things. So these are courses that are very, very popular. Entomology for anglers, it sells out, I think, within the first couple of weeks, if not faster. So it's all sold out for this year. So definitely keep your eye out if it's something that you're interested in. This is obviously different to Riverflies. It's more in depth. I can't remember how many days it's on, if it's just 1 day or not, but it's definitely a very, very highly rated course. The Royal Entomological Society Aquatic Insect Special Interest Group, it's a long-winded name. I am the new sort of coordinator for that. Craig McAdam has handed it down to me, and so I oversee that, and that's just for people who love aquatic insects, and there's conferences and training and all sorts of different stuff going on with that. The biological recording, so if you're into just recording different creatures, you know, if you're out on the river and you like looking at butterflies and fish and all sorts of different things, obviously biological recording is the way to go. Books galore, a lot of the things that I've learned all my material from. I'm pretty sure I've got an example here. So some of the books, you might be able to see it, or is it a bit blurred? But yeah, so that's one of the books, the Mayfly book. You can go on the FBA website and get all of the books on there. And then local events and training. So, you know, finding out who your local groups are for a start. They might even be putting on, you know, their own sort of workshops beyond your Riverfly training. Things like, you know, Mersey Rivers Trust do River Guardians, which is a great scheme, which is about sort of learning lots of different skills and getting out on the river. So there might be things like that, but obviously involve maybe then learning Riverfly and things. The FBA has all of the courses on the website. I'll share a link to that when I've stopped talking. And Aquatic Insects is the Royal Entomological Society website. And then you'll find me most years. I've been there the last 2 years at the British Fly Fishing International down in Shropshire, and Shropshire is Staffordshire, sorry. And I'm there and talking to anglers about river flies. We usually have sort of a tank there, thanks to Stuart Croft on the far right hand side. And this is Simon in the middle, who's the chief exec for the FBA, and we're there trying to promote the benefits of why Riverflies is so important. Getting involved, I have mentioned about the website and the email. The location of the site for the Riverflies is at the FBA, which is on Windermere, which I've mentioned, and all this information is on the website. So if you was thinking about going on any of them training courses, you'd be heading to the beautiful view of Lake Windermere. The Riverflies are on Twitter, it's worth mentioning, and also on Facebook, because I know most people tend to use one of those, if not both. So feel free to check them out as well. And yeah, if you're not sure, you can definitely get in touch with Riverflies and ask, or you might end up talking to me anyway, and hopefully I can help. So thank you. I'm going to take a drink now and stop talking. I see there's some questions that have come in as well.